Hopefully this will be a conversation, right? I'm going to share stories of communities that I visited across the country. And I was fortunate that the Kellogg Foundation came to me and says, Dave, we know a lot of love goes to the big cities, right? The people like Austin, Texas. How many of us are sick of reading about Austin, Texas? And Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, and Boston. Well, Kellogg believes in small town America. They believe in rural America. And they know that I have a history of researching that. And they says, Dave, we'd like you to kind of uncover stories. Stories of other small towns that are successfully competing in kind of this global paradigm. And that's what I did. It took about 2 years, went to 80 communities in 18 states. Arkansas was not one of those. And it was just because of travel limitations of our grant. But I'm sure that you folks are doing great things. In fact, I look forward to hearing about them throughout this conference here. But what I'm going to do is kind of share with you their stories, how they've been able to kind of add vitality. And hopefully it'll inspire you, perhaps give you an idea, and maybe stimulate some conversation. So to kind of get us started, I'm going to show you a video that kind of tees up this whole conversation about globalism, okay? So what's your thoughts? As you see that video, what kind of comes to mind? This is the audience participation part.
Hard to keep up.
Hard to keep up. Is it scary?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it is, right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Moving fast.
Moving fast, it sure is. And I think, particularly for small towns, sometimes it's easy to get lost in all this change. Maybe we don't have the connectivity that our urban counterparts do. Or we may not have the e-commerce or the e-government initiatives that our urban counterparts do. But you know what? The world's going to change without us, right? So as we look at trying to add vitality to our communities, we have to recognize that change is going to happen. Change is going to happen. And I think as we look at global competition, after World War II, we dominated the world stage. We were it. But now we know that growth, frankly, is increasingly happening elsewhere, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, are we declining? Or is the rest of the world catching up? What do you think?
A little bit of both.
I think it is a little bit of both. The reality is that we have new competitors. New competitors that really don't care about your small towns or my small town. It is what it is. But we also have new opportunities. New opportunities to lead our communities in the midst of all this change. One of my favorite quotes is from Darwin. He says, and Mark's got all these great quotes around the room. I don't know if he has this one. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but those most responsive to change. And as I watch that video, I think, wow, that quote kind of hits it, right? Because the world is going to change, whether we like it or not. And so it becomes incumbent upon us as community leaders to say, how can we change with it? How can we lead our communities amidst all this change? As we look at global growth, we can't use our old strategies because it's a new economy. It is a new economy. Things are different. And we can't apply what we've done in the past and how we've approached problems to address today's challenges. It used to be that we kind of sold our communities as a cheap place to do business. Now we know in this new economy that it's all about being rich in talent and ideas. It used to be that we were all about attracting companies. Come work here. because we have inexpensive wages. Now we know it's all about attracting educated people. It used to be if we had too many amenities, well, that added to the cost of doing business. And that's not the proposition we were selling. Now we know that these physical and cultural amenities are kind of key to making our community a place where people want to live. It used to be that, frankly, our success was fixed, based on perhaps a natural resource, agriculture, whatever the case may be. Now we know that really our success is based on our ability to learn and do things differently. And finally, it used to be that economic development was primarily a government function. Now what we're seeing is different actors, different players be engaged in the process. And that's exciting. So I mentioned that I flew over the country and visited all these communities. And myself and some grad students took a look at what were some of the success themes that kind of emerged from our research. And really 5 pillars kind of emerged. 1, a commitment to entrepreneurship and innovation, strategic investments, quality of place, strong social capital, and a commitment to regionalism. So what I'm going to do is kind of unpack these. Spend some time on each pillar. And then share stories, real examples from real communities in terms of what they're doing. So the first success theme that we saw was these communities were committed to create an environment that supports innovation and entrepreneurship. They recognize that they have to step back and say, okay, if we're going to be successful, we have to look at the environment as well as the individual entrepreneur. So really looking at it from 2 perspectives. 1, they focus in on that individual entrepreneur to find out what his or her needs are and how can they make their enterprise more successful. And then they step back and say, okay, from a community perspective, what is it that we can do to help the overall business environment thrive? And this is tough, frankly, in small towns. Because sometimes the chatter at the coffee shop downtown is, well, Joe's never going to make it. So what the heck is he thinking? So we pull down the entrepreneurial spirit versus prop it up. And frankly, the research shows that's why many entrepreneurs prefer to operate in a bigger city, because they can be a little bit anonymous. They'll kind of fly under the radar. In a small town, we all know each other's business, right? And that can be good and it can be bad, depending on what the narrative is. So the first community I'm going to highlight is Fairfield, Iowa. Has anybody been there? Mark has. Fairfield's population, about 6,500 people. This truly is the poster child of entrepreneurial development. They recognize and celebrate entrepreneurship on a daily basis. Their local newspaper has an entrepreneur column. They have an entrepreneur hall of fame, big community banquet where each year they honor the inductees. They have the most extensive mentoring program I've ever witnessed in the community. If I want to start a business, I can get a phone call. I'll be invited to lunch or breakfast. And when I show up, there'll be 2 other existing entrepreneurs in the community there. And they'll say, Dave, we're here to help you. We're here to answer your questions, kind of tell you where some of the landmines may be, provide advice, you can take it or leave it. But we're here to mentor you to hopefully make you successful. And it's all free. The only thing we ask is that when your business is successful, that you also become a mentor to others. Now we know that in some small towns, capital can be a challenge. This small town has their own angel fund, their own venture capital fund, to help spur new business development. And how they've done? Not too bad, actually. Past 20 years, they've just created 3,000 new jobs, and perhaps most importantly, personal income has tripled. Yeah, they're the best in the country. When you go to their website, they talk about the Fairfield entrepreneur relocation program. They're not looking for businesses, they're looking for entrepreneurs. And they showcase the various amenities that they offer to help entrepreneurs be successful. Good example of how to support entrepreneurship. I go from there to Columbus, Indiana. Columbus is a little bigger town, about 37,000 people, about an hour from Indianapolis. They're really creating an entrepreneurial or an ecosystem. So okay, what can we do on a variety of different levels to help our entrepreneurs? And so they do a couple different things. They know that networking is important, right? Kind of the Fairfield model. So they have regular networking events called the Entrepreneurs Network 10. Here's a picture of them right here, where they get together, they bring speakers, and they learn from one another. They also want to make sure that resources are available for their entrepreneurs when they need them. So all their information is put online because we know, according to research, that most entrepreneurs will look for information between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Okay? So unless your offices are open between 10 o'clock at night and 2 o'clock in the morning, you miss an opportunity. So what they're doing is really creating a virtual front door, not only for Fairfield, but for Columbus, but for surrounding communities. And they're drilling down to the high school level. They have a business plan competition that awards prizes for the most viable business and the most innovative business. Again, trying to create a whole ecosystem within their community to support entrepreneurial development. Okay. I go there to a very small community, actually a whole county-wide initiative, Juneau County, Wisconsin. Juneau County, the county-wide population is about 22,000. Okay, pretty rural. No major cities. But there, a gentleman by the name of Terry Whipple, says, we have people working on entrepreneurial activities, but they're kind of independent. So how can I bring them together? And what he's done is formed a club. It's called the Entrepreneurs and Innovation Club, EIC. It's pretty simple. They get together once a month. Here's a picture of them here. And they share stories. And I attended one of their meetings and I was amazed. It's kind of like a maestro in that Terry has people go around the room and introduce themselves and talk about what they're working on. And then as each person introduced themselves, what he would do is say, okay, you know what, Sally, you need to talk to Jim over here because Jim is looking exactly for that type of service. And then after the introductions, like a beehive. I mean, people are making those connections, providing those support systems and that camaraderie that's important for these entrepreneurs to be successful. Now, my last example is a very small town not far from where I live, called Westphalia, Michigan, population 500 people. Now, how many of you are from a town that big? A couple of you, all right. So in Westphalia, it was actually the faith community. The faith community who said, you know what, we want to do something different. And what they did was they actually took a lease on this building downtown, went to their youth group at the church, and said, guess what, kids? We just took a lease 3 years on the building, and we're giving it to you. You've got 3 years to come up with the business idea and make it work. And actually, we'll cover you for 2 of those 3 years. Well, hopefully by year 3, you're breaking even. Maybe a lot of prayer went into that, I'm not sure. So what the students did was actually created this business here called The Ark. It's kind of a ice cream shop / sub shop / after school hangout where the kids congregate. It's filled an empty storefront. It's become a gathering place in the community. And what a powerful message for those kids, right? In terms of the faith community saying, make it work. Valuable lessons. What we also saw, besides entrepreneurship, many communities were saying, all right, how do we add innovation? Because there's always someone who can do it cheaper, right? There's always someone who can do it cheaper. So how do we add innovation? Part of that requires connectivity. Wenatchee, Washington, population about 9,000 people. Has anybody been there? Heart of Apple Country, right? This is Apple Capital USA. They were very creative. They looked at their state legislation and says, the Port Authority legislation allows us to access some funds and invest in infrastructure. This is not a port community. They have a river, and that's about it. But they found a loophole to be able to essentially construct the Community Technology Center. Here it is, a CTC. And you can see the type of investments that they've made in this small town in the middle of Washington, pretty isolated, to connect themselves. In fact, it connects to the world. When I was there, I toured the facility, and in one room there was a video conference going on with some apple growers and researchers from Washington State, connected with Rutgers University out of New Jersey, connected with some Japanese produce buyers. In fact, their investment is so impressive, there's this technology company called Yahoo, you've heard of them before, right? They says, we want to locate our Western regional facility in your building. Again, saying, all right, if we're going to be in the apple production business, we're going to do so in a worldwide market. And that means we have to be connected to the world. And they did it in a very big way. And I go there from a very different story. Nelsonville, Ohio. Has anybody been there? Population, probably about 4,000 people. Nelsonville is an arts community. There's these arts communities everywhere, right? And they have a history of arts. And when you look at their downtown, they have different arts galleries. It's really a pretty town. They have a community college here, Hocking Community College. And they have an arts incubator. But here's the cool thing. So they have these students that are studying art. And it says, well, how do we connect them to some of our local manufacturers, some of our tool and die and otherwise, to try to get some artistic impressions or artistic approaches to some very traditional manufacturing, kind of left brain, right brain things. It's been very successful. Again, looking at the assets that they have and saying, how do we connect the dots? How do we connect the dots and make our community more successful? So the second major theme, first, any questions about those communities I just highlighted in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation?
So are the students running the store?
Yes, they are. Good question. So the question was, are the students running the arts incubator? Yes. Absolutely. And then the college is making the connections with the business community to offer the students their artistic expression for some of the business approaches. Other questions? Yeah.
Are we going to get this on CD or?
Yeah, I can. I told Mark I'll put it in a.
I can't ride as fast as.
Yeah, don't do that. Listen to me. Yeah, we'll give you a copy. Mark will probably put it online. Okay. Yeah.
Other than the faith-based situation, who kind of drives all of these things to happen?
Great question. Who's the driver? You know what? There's no common answer. A lot of times it may have been an elected official, or sometimes it's a community leader that's not a positional leader. I mean, they're not a mayor, they're not a chamber director, but they're passionate about their community. And as long as they have followers, they're able to get some things going.
No theme throughout all this that you were finding?
No, we didn't find any. It's that one person. The only theme exactly is that passion, making their community better. Right? Great question. Others? Yeah.
Are there common demographics across these communities that you studied?
I'm sorry, say again.
Are these specific communities you studied, do they share common demographics?
Okay, question is the demographics on these communities. No. There's not a commonality other than we looked at size and then we used a number of different matrices to try to decide who do we visit. Did we get all the right people? No. And again, I think that there's probably stories in this room that are worthy of being highlighted here. But what we tried to do was say, okay, what are some communities that seem to be performing well? The well being based on an economic vitality index that we used borrowed from the University of Georgia that has a number of different factors, including unemployment, per capita income, growth, so on and so forth. So that was just one matrix, but there's a couple different factors that kind of entered into somewhat of a complicated formula in terms of did we visit them or don't we visit them? Great question. Okay, so keep moving along here. So what we also saw was that these communities were really investing in their human and capital talent, right? And saying, all right, how do we use our population and their educational expertise in a very strategic manner? And I think there's some important assets. You know, what we saw in these communities is they focus on well-educated youth and a commitment to lifelong learning. In some cases, green infrastructure made sense. I'm not going to give an example of that today because of time limitations. Repeatedly, what they said is, how do we make our downtowns better? Okay? Because a downtown is the face of a community. And oftentimes, when you drive through a community, people get a kind of a gut feeling based on what your downtown looks like. And so these communities are saying, how do we make our downtown look nice? A place where people want to hang out. In many communities, they looked at immigrants as a very strong opportunity for development, particularly well-educated immigrants. Candidly, they're more entrepreneurial than many of us in this room. Okay? And so they looked at that as an asset. So let's first look at the human investment. Zeeland, Michigan, population about 4,000 people. Zeeland is about 45 minutes to a larger community, Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is a large town, about 200,000 people. That whole region has a history of furniture making. Okay? As the furniture industry has kind of contracted and become more efficient because of foreign competition, what this town found itself facing was a number of industrial designers that were essentially contract employees. People kind of working out of their home. Because the furniture companies like Steelcase and Herman Miller and others that are headquartered there simply don't have them on their payroll. It's more efficient for them to just contract based on needs. But what this small town recognized is that these people are important. This is what our economic base is. So how can we use it more strategically? And so what they did was they said, all right, we want to lead the world in industrial design. So they said, let's bring in the guru, a guy out of California. And this is not my field, but there's a guy out of California that's internationally recognized for industrial design. They were able to recruit him. And he put on a number of education programs and resides in the community. And all of a sudden, they're on the map. And now what they're doing is really conducting these trainings and marketing the region as kind of the epicenter for industrial design. Not only for the furniture industry, for any industry that needs those type of services. Again, looking at the assets that they had says, how do we do it differently? And I compare that to Sparta, North Carolina. Has anybody been there? Sparta's population about 4,000 people, similar sized town. Very different story. So Sparta's right here and it's part of North Carolina. They have a major employer, Martin Marietta. Heard of them, international company, right? If Martin Marietta ever left Sparta, it would be a body blow. Because this small town, about 4,000 people, probably about 350, 400 are employed at Martin Marietta, best paying jobs. But more importantly, all the industries that suppliers that service that particular location is substantial. So this small town recognized the importance of this business. And so what they did was scheduled a meeting with the CEO of Martin Marietta. And they says, Mr. CEO, your company is so important to our small town. If it were to ever leave, it would be devastating. Can you make a commitment that you're going to stay in our community? You know what he said? No. He says, we're an international company. I'm beholden to the stockholders of Martin Marietta Corporation. We are going to do business wherever it makes sense for us to do business economically. But I will tell you in their short 15-minute meeting that if your town, Sparta, can continually demonstrate that it makes sense for us to do business here, then clearly we'll do that. Well, this delegation was a little dejected. They wanted a commitment, and they didn't get it. But on their flight home, they started thinking in terms of what is it going to take that can demonstrate our commitment to Martin Marietta, our commitment to being a great place to do business. And so what they developed was really a training program in advanced material logistics. Now, they don't have a university here. They have a community college, I mentioned that they're in Caldwell, up here in Wilkes County, next county over. So they had some conversations. They said, I know you folks don't have anything like this, but we have to demonstrate that we're all about learning and efficiency. And so they put together this program. Then they had eyeball-to-eyeball conversations with the workers, saying, we'd like you to enroll in these courses. Company's not going to pay for it. We just want to demonstrate that we're committed to education. And a number of the employees, a majority of the employees actually, has taken coursework. What they're really doing is changing the culture of this community. Because this region in North Carolina, I'll be honest with you, does not have a culture of high commitment to education. And they're trying to change that. Starting with their employees and then having community discussions and saying, you know what, we have to be lifelong learners. Again, remember that video. India has more kids, honor kids, than we have total kids, right? So if we're going to compete, we have to demonstrate that we're willing to learn. And it's been successful. We repeatedly saw communities that says, we're going to raise the bar relative to our educational commitment. First one, Houston, Minnesota, population 1,200 people, small town. Here was the superintendent who said, we have to do something different. He saw a number of different students that have chosen to be homeschooled versus attend his school. And I don't know how it is in Arkansas, but in Minnesota, they get paid for every kid that goes to school, right? Seats and butt. And so the school is losing revenue. He also said that, you know, my town is not connected. Our kids are not connected. And so what he did, the superintendent, talk about these leaders, right? The passionate leaders. What the superintendent did was he wrote a small grant, actually a fair significant grant, to the Mayo Foundation. Was able to get some used computers, not brand spanking new computers, new Apples, and put them in a number of households. And then he negotiated a special rate with the internet provider to those who didn't have connectivity. And then he had some very heartfelt conversations with this teachers union and says, all right, what is it going to take to raise our educational level? What's it going to take to make our education system the best in Minnesota? And so what they created was an online learning curriculum, the best of which I've never seen. It has the full complement of AP courses. It has 5 foreign languages, including Mandarin Chinese that's taught by a PhD who lives in mainland China. They raised the bar. And in creating the Minnesota Virtual Academy, they not only attracted the students that were homeschooled within the district, but students statewide. In fact, 70% of their revenue for this school district comes from kids who don't live in the district. And the superintendent's smart enough to say, you know what? Let's have some conversations with our students. And that conversation goes something like this. Even small town Houston, Minnesota offers the best education program in the country. Remember that. Remember that in the future. Rochester, Indiana, population about 6,000 people. They too were not satisfied with how their educational system was working. And so the superintendent looked at a new model called New Tech High, which really changes the whole dynamic of education, kind of flips it on its head, a lot of group projects, kind of like what we do in business. And they had to beg the people from New Tech High, which is based out of California, to try it in a rural environment. Here's what I was impressed, though. In my conversation with the superintendent, she said, you know what, Dave? We're preparing students for tomorrow, but we're not on the same page as those businesses. And so what she's done is had some conversations with their economic development counterpart. And so now they're on the same page. In fact, they go to the same conferences. She attends his economic development conferences, and then she drags his butt to her educational conferences. Because she said, we have to understand each other's world. Because we're not separate. We have different functions, but we really have the same goal. Okay. That's what successful communities are doing. The biggest community we went to was Dubuque, Iowa. Dubuque's population about, I think it's about 80,000, give or take. But they have a great story. Dubuque has made a 180. Back in the 1980s, this was kind of the armpit of the Midwest. It had unemployment rate approaching 20%, 18.5%. And this town is now appearing on a number of best places to live map. And when I went there, we had a conversation. They shared with me how they're engaging young university town. I said, well, that's interesting because you don't have any universities here. And they says, well, we have a small private school, but you're right. But if we were to draw a circle 60 miles around Dubuque, there are some universities, including University of Wisconsin at Platteville and others. So they're looking at themselves from a regional context. And to establish themselves with each of these small towns and kind of serve as the epicenter, they've established young professional chapters in each of these communities so that the students can look at Dubuque. And then what they've done is really set up an internship academy. And they says, if you're a freshman, we're going to give you a shadow experience. Okay? So that you can kind of find out what a business is like or a career is like. If you're a sophomore, we promise you a mentoring experience. And if you're a junior or senior, we're going to give you a full internship, a meaningful internship. And we've identified a few areas that are related to our strategic growth that if you come to our community, we'll forgive part of your college loan. IBM was so impressed with their approach that they recently selected Dubuque, Iowa, over the likes of Austin and Indianapolis and Madison, Wisconsin, as a site for their new regional training facility. In fact, I was in Madison, Wisconsin. It was announced. Madison, they think a little highly of themselves. And the front page of the Capital Daily Times in Madison was Dubuque who? Well, I tell you, Dubuque's got their act together. In fact, they have a YouTube video, I'm going to show it to you in just a second, that really talks about how they're changing what people think about their community. But the mayor had a great goal. He says, you know what, Dave? The next 5 years is going to define the next 50 for our community. So we better get it right. Looking at that change, again, that video, and saying, oh my goodness, what can we do? What programs can we put in place so that we can compete? So let me show you this video and get your thoughts.
Why Dubuque?
The river, bike trails, lots of apartments,
Town clock,
skiing,
disc golf,
beaches,
So funky.
theater, Casa,
symphonies, haiku readings, dragon boats, great restaurants,
one word, concerts,
nightlife, wine bars,
dueling pianos,
karaoke.
Why Dubuque?
Young professionals like me.
Great careers, downtown wireless,
I put my degree to good use. Progressive.
short commute,
Jobs.
So funky.
welcoming,
Being green. Affordability.
community involvement,
All America City. Safety. Farmers Market.
familia,
No traffic jams. Small town value with big city amenities. Jazz Fest.
Do you have any drums in your house?
why Dubuque?
Why Dubuque?
Why Dubuque?
Why Dubuque?
Convinced? Need more reasons?
How many more reasons do you need?
Don't believe me?
Because it's right for me. This is home.
This is home.
This home. Why Dubuque? Why Dubuque?
Why Dubuque?
Why Dubuque?
Why Dubuque? Why not? Why not?
Why not?
Why not? Okay, no.
Why not? Why not? Why not?
So what do you think? You know, when you look at, yeah, go ahead.
Now, I love Dubuque, and the one thing that was interesting to me is they did not play up the riverboat gambling. They played everything else. which was
Right.
great.
You know, and a couple of things about the video. One, Dubuque is not that racially diverse, nor are they that demographically young, okay? But clearly what they're going for is a different storyline in terms of who they want to be, using people who live in that community. So I think they're doing a nice job. I really do. As we look at these communities, the other thing we saw is strong social capital. Strong social capital, networks that really strengthen the bonds, both within the community and bridging to other communities. We also saw young adult engagement, okay? I think we saw a little bit of that in Dubuque, right? And an authentic youth voice. Drilling down to the kids and saying, you know what, you have a voice in our community, and helping to move our community forward. So look at communities like Pella, Iowa, population 6,000 people. Pella has two major employers. The Pella Window people, right? Pella Corp. And secondly, Vermeer Manufacturing. For those of you in the agricultural industry, Vermeer is a well-known forage company. Both are international companies. Both attract talent across the country and across the world for that matter. Both experience problems of people moving into small-town Pella, and then the young talent would move away because they just couldn't fit within the community. And this is a name which suggests it's a very Dutch community, strong Dutch heritage. Okay? People are very nice, I'll be honest. People are very nice. But if you're not Dutch, you're not really part of the social fabric. Call a spade a spade. And so what they launched was a campaign called Positively Pella. And part of it was looking at their community in the mirror and having those discussions. How welcoming are we of people who perhaps are different than us? And how important it is. And so what they've done is really looked at strengthening the social bonds of those new residents, getting them to be a part of the fabric of the community, and having those community conversations that says we need to be more welcoming. And the result has been impressive. They are retaining that talent within the community. It's kind of been a 180. Now, I recognize that the economy is playing a part of that. I think as you look at young professional engagement, there's a couple key factors. One, a third place factor. You want a place where people can congregate, right? You know, we have our home, we have our work, and then there's this third place. A place where people congregate and talk. That's very important from a community development context. Secondly, if you don't have a young professional organization, start one. Birds of a similar feather flock together, right? I don't care how small your town is, young professionals want to hang out with other young professionals. So you need to have that forum to allow them to do that. And I think that there's an opportunity for engagement with this group in community decision making. One of my favorite examples is Thinkers and Drinkers. What a great name, huh? Out of Youngstown, Ohio. Now normally I'd show a video here, but we're kind of close on time, so I'm going to keep moving here. But I'm going to tell you their story. So what Thinkers and Drinkers do out of Youngstown is they get together at an adult drinking establishment, and people invite other people. So it's a group of about, say, 40 people. And then they put different ideas in terms of how they can make their community better in a hat. And they draw it out, and then they have a conversation. And then based on that conversation, they hopefully get some consensus, and then they send it up the pike to try to get some action. But the Thinkers and Drinkers are very engaged in their community. And really what they're doing is changing the narrative. And I think that's important. I think changing that narrative is so crucial because communities move in the way of a conversation. Let me give you an example from Thinkers and Drinkers. So they were sharing their story about how they engage their people at the local chamber meeting. The local chamber is very traditional in Youngstown, Ohio. And this was a chamber luncheon. And I don't know if you know the history of Youngstown, Ohio, but Youngstown at one point was a very thriving steel company, or steel town. Second only in the country to Pittsburgh. It's actually not that far from Pittsburgh, about an hour away. And those steel jobs were the best paying jobs anywhere. Okay. So as they were at the chamber meeting, some of the longtime chamber members were talking about how things used to be. You know, God, when we had all those steel mills, man, you could get a job like that, and boy, they were good paying jobs. If you could only hit rewind. And the folks at Thinkers and Drinkers said, stop it. Stop it. We weren't even born when those companies left our community. And as long as we keep talking about where we've been in the past, we're never really going to talk about where we need to be in the future. So let's change the conversation now. We can imagine it was pretty startled there at the chamber meeting. But I think in small towns, our conversation is critical. How many times do we tell kids there's no future for you here, right? You have to leave. Or again, back at that coffee shop telling Joe is never going to make it with that new enterprise. So as community leaders, you have to set that tone. You have to set that narrative in terms of what your community's conversation. Is it positive? Because sometimes the community has a poverty of spirit. Okay? And unless we are positive, we'll never overcome that. What we also saw in these communities was strong youth engagement. Oftentimes they turn to arts and culture to kind of connect with their youth. The goal is very simple. We want to create a positive memory. Because the research is very clear. There's a couple of touchstones in a kid's life. 5th grade and a high school junior. And if we can create a positive memory at that stage in life, we're exponentially more likely for these kids to rebound back into our community. Okay? And we need to provide authentic opportunities for them too to have a voice in our community. So a couple of examples. Bothell, Washington, population about 7,000 people. They have community banners. Every community has banners, right? Their community banners celebrate youth. And I apologize, this picture's not the best. It was raining when I took this, raining in Washington, go figure. But these are pictures of kids right here. When I went into their school, you know what the kids said to me? Did you see my picture on 3rd and Elm? You could be darn sure that they knew where these banners were. In fact, this small town actually has pictures of skateboarders right here. How many towns have pictures of skateboarders in their downtown? None. One. Bothell. Usually we say just the opposite, no skateboarding here, right? We should just put up signs, no fun here, right? Bothell says, you know what, this is part of their culture. This is what the kids enjoy. We're going to put it on their banners. New York Mills, Minnesota, population about 1,000 people. They have a visiting arts program, limited fine arts program at their high school. As they bring artists in, they connect them to their high school. Wonderful opportunity for the kids. One of my favorite examples is Dowagiac, Michigan. Population about 6,000 people. They have a fine arts festival to celebrate the blossoms of the dogwood trees there. Bring in top-notch entertainment. Here's the kicker. If you're going to perform at the Dogwood Fine Arts Festival, you're required by contract to spend time in a school system. Okay? Any jazz fans here? You've heard of the Neville brothers, right? Art and Charles Neville. This is, right here, Charles Neville jamming with the high school jazz band. So I ask you, how cool is it for this young gentleman here, or these young ladies here, to be jamming with Charles Neville? That is something they're going to remember for the rest of their life. They're not going to forget that experience. Creating those positive memories. One of the communities we visit that really gets it is Jonesville, Michigan. Population about 1,800 people. They're always surveying people, kind of asking what is it that they want. They asked their senior citizens, long-term residents, what is it that you like about our community? What was it that rooted you in our community? You know what they said? You know what? We stayed because we had a good time growing up here. And there was some economic opportunity, so we were able to stay rooted in the community. I mentioned that they're always surveying different age groups. A few years ago, they asked their third graders, what is it that you'd like from your community? Here's what these kids said, typical third grade response. We'd like a rock wall. Sounds like third graders, doesn't it? Yeah. So what did the community do? They built it. This is, if that's what they want, we're going to build it. I mentioned that they're always surveying people, and they're kind of asking, rate our community on a scale of 1 to 10. About 4 years ago, they did one of these surveys. They had the highest response for middle school students, 7th graders. And I says, what's going on here? So they did a little focus group. You know what these 7th graders said? Back in middle school, we asked for a rock wall, and you built it. We tend to discount the youth voice, right? We don't provide authentic opportunities for them to tell us what's important. Jonesville gets it. Jonesville understands if they have a chance in hell of these kids coming back, they have to listen to them. And they're doing just that. They're listening to these kids. So I provide a simple idea for your community, and some of you may have done this. And that's to provide a disposable camera to the youth and ask them to take pictures of what they like and what they dislike. And then have the pictures developed. It's easy now with digital, and then share it at a future commission meeting, planning commission, whatever the case. Has any community done that? It's called Photo Voice. Share a story. I do a lot of community coaching. We did this in a small town in Michigan's Thumb region. Population about 5,000. Remember as if it was yesterday. High school senior, tears running down her eyes. And she talked about the community that she loved, but she says that, I'm not going to be able to stay here. There's just no future for me in this town. As she showed picture after picture after picture of empty storefronts. To her, those empty storefronts meant no future for her in her hometown of Carroll. So we had to try to devise some type of strategy, but it really allowed us to kind of tap in to what those kids were thinking. My friend Craig Schroeder at the Heartland Center says, there's a lot of different things we can do to youth. We can do things to youth, we can do things for youth, or we can do things with youth. So often we're over here, the skateboard zoning, or trash cleanup, true story. My son, he's a college sophomore now. He was in high school, great kid in honor society, and we've always tried to instill the importance of volunteering. He gets a call, he says, we're going to do a trash pickup. He says, yep, I'll be there. But he hung up the phone, he says, you know what, Dad? I think my only thing my community wants me for is to pick up trash. So we have to be careful in terms of the messages that we send. If we move down this continuum, we need to do things for youth, or most importantly, do things with youth. We're there, frankly, a part of that community conversation. There's a lot of community strategies in terms of what it takes to retain youth in the younger generation. One is to create economic and career choices that are appealing to youth. And I know you're saying, Dave, that's easier said than done, but I'm not sure that we fully expose them to the broad-based opportunities that may be available, such as youth entrepreneurship. These are pictures from Ord, Nebraska, population 2,200 people, and their youth entrepreneurship program. 4 of their downtown businesses are a direct result of this program that's been going on for almost 20 years. Secondly, evolve community cultures that are embracing of youth in the younger generation. So if you have a community festival, perhaps in addition to the fiddlers that you have each year, you provide an opportunity for the garage bands to perform, because that's the genre of music that the youth are listening to. And it's not at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Right? Thirdly, proactively link your community goals and strategies to the young people. And lastly, focus your development efforts on those who want to return to your hometown. Great story. Brookfield, Missouri, population 1,200 people. Like many towns, they saw their youth leave their community. And they said, we want to send a message. So what they did was, at their high school graduation, they gave a gift to each kid. And that gift was a mailbox. with that student's name on it. And inside that mailbox was a letter. They've now upgraded to a CD. So let me kind of paraphrase the letter. It says, we're so proud of you. We're proud of your accomplishments and all you've contributed to our community of Brookfield. As many of you go off to gain an education, we encourage you, or we wish you the best. We hope you meet new friends, gain new ideas. But always remember that Brookfield is your hometown. And as a reminder, we already have a mailbox with your name on it. Wow. What a powerful message. What a powerful message for these youth, right? In fact, many of them at their open houses, this is Sam Thudium, showcase it, to accept get well wishes. Great message.
Where was that?
Brookfield, Missouri. Population 1,200. What we also saw in these communities was a commitment to quality of place. It's more of this, which is a nice downtown, and less of this, which is any town USA, right? We've become so commoditized that we don't even need to put names on our businesses. We know what this is, right? We know what this is, right? Even here in the South. But what we need to do is look at how can we create these high-quality living environments that are key to attracting youth. It's really all about placemaking. It's all about placemaking in our communities. It's about building on our unique history, our assets, to identify community pride and to foster community pride. And as part of that, we want to increase social interaction. Okay. Rebecca Ryan, I've shared the stage with her on a number of occasions. She's out of Madison. She says this next generation of talent is the first to more closely identify with their communities than their companies. So what are you doing in your communities to help your residents identify with your community? We did some research where we talked to about 30,000 young adults in Michigan. Here's what they said they look for in a small town. And I'm guessing that many of your communities offer that type of environment. Teddy Roosevelt says it best, do what you can with what you have where you are. So we're not asking you to theme anything. What we are asking is that you look at the assets that you have and capitalize on them. Finally, what we saw in these communities was that they were looking at the regional assets and saying, how can we leverage them across multiple municipalities? So I look at what they're doing in Indiana and having civic conversations, bringing community to community together to really explore new opportunities. North Carolina, a group of counties here in north central North Carolina is cooperating with the Research Triangle down here, 65 miles away, to say, how do we establish a North Research Triangle, north, to capitalize on your networks in our communities. As we look at these successful regions, really what they've done is they've uncovered, or they provide a safe space for complex thinking. Because we're always a little parochial in what we do, right? And so what these communities have done is says, how can we provide the environment that allows us to have these type of conversations? So I look at Peoria, Illinois, and their next innovation center that was built actually, it's finishing construction, brings together all the players under one facility so that they can share information. Moscow, Idaho, population 12,000. Here was a mayor who says, you know what, we have to capitalize on the assets that we have. So she branded the region as a Palouse Knowledge Corridor, and then she worked with Washington State University, 8 miles away, University of Idaho, and the students to bring them together in a joint marketing plan competition because she couldn't get the universities to work together. Well, when students start working together, university faculty get nervous. And so now the universities are working together. But she was the person who made that happen. And I go back to Columbus, Indiana, where they established a regional initiative with a simple goal. If we advance every person by training up one ladder, one step, I should say, on their ladder, we'll do more to impact per capita income than anything else that we can do. So they're working with 34 high schools to explore regional cluster opportunities and have built a center to help the training in doing that. The last thing that we saw in these communities was there was a conviction that in the end it's about us. We can't wait for some outside grant to save us. We can't wait for some millionaire to invest in something. It's up to us to grab our future and change our direction, which I think is what Breakthrough Solutions is all about, right? My last example is Argolia, Kansas. This town of about 800 people in western Kansas. Has anybody been in western Kansas? People are few and far between, right? And so when the one and only grocery store closed, 60 miles is a long ways to drive for a gallon of milk. And so what the community did was they built a convenience/grocery store on the edge of town. And they used the social capital from that to say, okay, what else can we do? Because there's a lot of good feelings. And so now they're doing a housing development with land donated and builders donating their time. And they're offering houses like this, 1,300 square foot ranch, because that's what they build in Kansas at cost, $54,000. And if you enroll kids in our school district, we'll pay your closing costs. So there's a community that's drawn a line in the sand and saying, we'll do whatever we have to do, push whatever button we have to push to make sure that we don't wither and die on the vine. Okay? A conviction to do it in yourself. So in conclusion, what can we learn from other successful places? We have to create quality places to live. We want to retain and attract people of talent. Okay? We want to welcome entrepreneurs and support innovation at all levels. Education is important, not just K-12, but lifelong learning. Remember Sparta and Zealand and what they're doing. So how can we foster that within our communities? We want to involve all of our citizens in engagement, and that includes the youth in our communities. And we need to promote regional cooperation. And we can do that if we adopt a can-do attitude. Over-observation is, I think you need to know your community. What we saw in these communities was that those leaders were listening to their community, right? And before they ended up on a tombstone, because their community was saying, I told you I was sick, they says, no, we're going to take action. We're going to take action to make our community better. And I believe each of you in this room are doing just the same. So with that, thank you very much. And I think I have 4 minutes for questions, 3 minutes? I have 10. Any questions?